Hey, thanks for coming to my lightning talk on making software bill of materials or SBOMs actionable using Buildkite and Cloudsmith. So I'm Ciara Carey. I work in developer relations in Cloudsmith, which is a cloud-native artifact repository. Before this, I worked as a software engineer for over 10 years, but it's only since working with Cloudsmith that I got my head around the topic of securing your software supply chain, because they deal with build artifacts, they integrate with public repositories, and they deal with signing, and they know a lot about how you built your software. That's how I got on the topic of SBOMs. So let's talk about your software supply chain. The threats to your software supply chain. SBOMs is one of the responses to secure your supply chain. And then let's end with a really fast workflow on making SBOMs actionable. So your software supply chain is all the steps that go into building your software. It's your source code, your build tools like Buildkite, your artifact repository like Cloudsmith. And a big part of that is your dependencies, your third-party dependencies. Now, they can be in-house or proprietary, but they're really likely to be open source. Open source software, wherever there's software, there's open source. So over 80% of software products contain open source software. And this image really illustrates some of the issues with this. They're so important, but maybe sometimes a little bit neglected. And attackers can target how you consume your software with dependency confusion attacks or typo squatting attacks, where they hope that you make a typo when you're listing your dependencies. But a really big threat are critical vulnerabilities in your open source software. So there was a critical vulnerability in 2014 called Heartbleed in OpenSSL. And research from 2020 showed that it was still a big threat in 2020, even though it had been 6 years since it had been fixed. And this shows you that critical vulnerabilities have a very long tail. And that's because sometimes it's hard to know what dependencies are in your software. You might know your direct dependencies, but you might know the transitive dependencies, the dependencies. Another thing is it mightn't be a priority to update all the dependencies in your code base. But you have to start at the start. If you don't know what you have, then you won't fix the vulnerabilities. So that's where SBOMs come in. And the concept of SBOMs has been around for a long time in manufacturing and in food production. And so a software bill of materials is basically a list of all the components in your software, including your dependencies and their dependencies. And there's two formats to list these in, SPDX and CycloneDX. And what they do at the heart of it is they tell you what is in my software. And you can generate an SBOM at different stages of the software development lifecycle. The source code, the build time, which is often the most accurate time. You can on the built artifact itself, on a container image, or at runtime. And the tooling is quite new for generating and analyzing SBOMs, but the nicest workflow that I've seen so far is around container images. So let's do a really quick run through of what a possible workflow would look like for container images. So we're going to start with building our container image. We have our Docker file. We build it using Buildkite or Docker, and we get a container image or a Docker image. So then we have to host our image, and we can host that in Cloudsmith. It's a container registry. Now that we have our image up on our container registry, we want to generate our SBOM. We're going to do that using Syft tooling. It's an open source tool from Anchor. And now that we have an SBOM, we need to host it. So we're going to use Sigstore tooling to host that SBOM alongside our container image in Cloudsmith. And the good thing about Sigstore is that it integrates with both Cloudsmith and Buildkite. And we can sign that as well. So that's good. So now that we have an SBOM, what we need to do is actually do something with it. We're going to try to find the vulnerabilities in it. And we're going to use, we're going to set up a nightly test in Buildkite to scan our container image for vulnerabilities. And we're going to use an open source tool called Grype from Anchor to do that. When we get a list of vulnerabilities, we can host them on Cloudsmith if we want to. And we can say, that can drive actions. So if a vulnerability is above a certain level, say high, we can say we're going to quarantine this artifact, or we can notify affected parties, the developers, security professionals. And so that's a really quick workflow. So SBOMs are a new enough concept in software. The tooling is new, but there is tooling there. So let's start generating SBOMs, understanding our software supply chain. So thanks so much. Bye.